Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.3, in which I am attempting to make Kerbals a multiplanetary species. And we have now the final do-it-yourself kit that is approaching the Duna Express tug. Ooh, we're coming in real fast. But as you recall, we have been sending up these do-it-yourself kits that we will be sending down to the Dunan surface to meet up with the tug that is going to bring it out there. And I decided at the end of the last episode that it was... I couldn't get the rendezvous to work such that I could have both... I could have two sets go. Because I had this originally planned that I was just going to send the 4 at a time, and then I was going to take another trip and then send another 4. But I couldn't get the rendezvous to work for that. Decouple. So I'm just going to go ahead and, staple them all together. But first, let's go ahead and send this guy home. Shoom. Okay, bye. Alright. So, yeah, I've just been doubling everything up and trying in a rough sort of way to make sure that the various masses that I have on here are roughly even. I'm sure that it's not, but that's also why I put that gigantic SAS ring up on the Duna Express tug, was specifically so that I didn't really have to worry about it. So just trying to get this to settle down a little bit, for goodness sake. This thing's a little wigglier for whatever reason. But yeah, so we are just sliding this on in. I've done so many of these now that it's all become very routine. This has not been an issue. So I'm just hoping that this actually works, because I haven't tested any further than this. I don't know if this is going to work when we get to Doudna. I don't know how the build is going to work, that sort of thing. So we'll be discovering all of that together. I think it has bounced off a little bit. There we go. Come on. Get in there. Kerchunk. There we go. Yeah, so this is kind of what we're looking at here, and this thing is starting to get laggy because it's about 1 million different pieces. So let's save the game. And each one of these represents the candle crane that I'll be sending up is going to be using to bring them down to the surface of Doudna. So each one has a little kit of ore to resupply the candle crane. And then this stage here is monopropellant ore, thermoelectric generators to provide a tiny amount of power, and those docking ports and control and all those things. So this part is going to come off after this thing maneuvers itself. So basically this is going to separate, this whole bit is going to separate, and then the candle crane is going to grab it, then this thing is going to pop itself off on its way down into the atmosphere so it can burn up after resupplying the candle crane. That way we have a little bit of extra supplies and we don't have to bring down this mass. Then each of these represents a separable container kit and do-it-yourself container. So this is all the material kits that is needed for the do-it-yourself container. So this is the double scorpion constructor, which you'll find out about that in a little bit. Needs 11,000 or so resources. The next step I could get this container to hold is 16,000. So there's one last thing to send up. Gosh, this thing is terrifying a little bit. But I guess we'll see how this works. I wonder if it can still turn. Oh, yes. Gosh, look at that SAS. Look at that rolling. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so anyways, we can point this prograde and kind of leave that there. And we have one last thing that I want to send up before we call this good and start plotting our trajectory to Doudna. Alright, so now we have an SLS-looking absolute monster rocket. This thing may not look it just by perspective here, but this is a 7.5 meter stage down here with the quad EMU engine. 3, 2, 1 launch. Alright, so this monstrosity is purely just to get a bunch of ore up into orbit. Did you guys know that ore is incredibly dense and is in... all of the containers for it are incredibly small, so 25,000 units of ore is requiring this whole massive setup, and it's kind of a big old thing. So Yeah, so it require. Oh, geez, that is wobbling. Aren't you strutted? Oh, geez. Okay, so hopefully this thing holds together. But yeah, we're just using real big parts and a actual 3-stage rocket to get this thing up into orbit. So the one thing about this that is pretty nice is that I actually get to use these SpaceY parts that I never get to use for any other purpose. So we're kicking off these massive solid rocket boosters. I have this big 7.5-meter chemical engine that we're flying with, and we're actually using a 3-stage approach to this. So I actually we kick that off, and then we have more emus underneath, a dual emu after the quad emu. Which has been necessary because this thing is incredibly heavy because ore is incredibly dense. So we're actually using kind of a, a Saturn-ish sort of approach to getting all this mass up into orbit. But yeah, it's fun to actually use these parts because I feel like I use a lot of very small parts for the very most part. I try to, save a lot of mass and not send huge things and all that stuff. So getting to actually send up massive constructions is a fun new change for me. All right, so all that huge mess, which looks like it's mostly been recovered. Yeah, very nice. That's a 300,000 fund stage here with the quad emu. And then these are the boosters for 15,000 apiece. Very nice. But yeah, all of that to get ka-chunk, this big ore tank up into orbit. That's basically it. So this is just a, the M5 multi-MOA 5-meter upper stage. And that's it. That's just how dense ore is, I guess. So we are coming up now on the Duna Express with a big load of ore to refuel the torch drive. And as we approach, we are just making sure that we are going to land there correctly and everything is all lined up. It looks like we've gotten at least a little bit of money back from the additional stages that we sent off. The heck was that? Oh, this was my previous do-it-yourself tug. So those have been coming back and landing properly as well, which is pretty darn cool. Shoot! I got distracted. Okay, so we're not going to hit anything, so that's nice at least. But yeah, we're going to sail past because I got distracted. We were closer than I thought, and this is a longer burn than I expected. Alright, so we are making our final approach after having screwed that initial approach up completely. Which is par for the course for me, really. We have arrived, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and, well, save the game first. Always do that. Then we are going to decouple this thing. And I have the RCS attached on here to act as the engine from this point forward. This thing can actually just go home. Or at least try to. I've been landing these transfer stages, which has been nice, but all I really wanted to do was burn them up. Or at least get rid of them. I don't want so much debris, gosh darn it. But yes, okay, so we have this here. Let's target that one just out of convenience. Cannot set target. I guess I'm already... Cannot set target. I do have control and everything, right? Well, we'll see what happens when I get a little bit closer. Looks like I'm already set there, so that's fine. So let's get this lined up, and then we will move on over. Alright, so here we are just about to make our docking. Making sure that we are lined up properly, slowing ourselves down a tad. And bouncing off, very nice. Coming back in. There we go, kerchunk. Now, I have a huge amount of ore that I can now pass out. So let's see what the best way is to do that. If I were to just click on the resource panel and open up every ore-containing object, it wouldn't be that easy, would it? Well, maybe... Nope, that one doesn't have... Okay. Alright, so I'm going to have to find another way to get the ore transferred across. Maybe if I enable the cross-feed on every single decoupler, of which I have something like 4 each. Okay, so I think the easiest way is going to be just to use ship manifest. So let's open that up, or scroll it on down to this 25,000, and then basically it's everything else is what I'm pushing this ore into. Although, first things first, before I start clicking everything else, I want these containers in the middle, which are not that one. Is that these? I think so. That looks like that's the case. Those 4, okay. So let's just transfer, looks like 17,000 to fill those up. Oh, that makes a weird, horrifying noise now. That's wonderful. Okay, that made just a terrifying noise, and I had to speed up the transfer rate because it was taking forever, but we have filled up... Whoa, what the heck happened here? Alright, this is why we save the game. Okay, so we are finishing up that transfer once again. Please don't break up. Whoa, there it goes. Interesting. As soon as the transfer finishes, it starts shaking and then it shakes itself apart. I wonder why that is. Alright, so I suspect that this has something to do with auto struts. So let's turn off all these auto struts, especially because what the heaviest part is going to be changing pretty dramatically here as we go. So I just want to make sure that this is all disabled at the moment. I'm planning on doing some auto strutting to get this hooked back together at some point, but for right now I think it's safest to just make sure as best I can that nothing is auto strutted to anything, just so that I can, you know, see if that might be the issue. So we'll save the game, turn this one off as well. Turn this up to 1,000 units. Whoa, there it goes. Look at that. What are you doing? Stop. Why are you wiggling? What is auto-shutted still? Actually, I think it might be that there's nothing auto-shutted. It's just wiggling and swaying a little bit by its connections because this is all very loose and not rigidly built in any way. So I think that might be the issue, is that this thing is so incredibly powerful, this SAS wheel, that trying to correct for those little tiny wiggles causes this thing to tear itself apart. So let's save the game one last time in the last place that we know that is actually working, and we will try one more time to transfer things over. I think it may have nothing to do with the containers or the ship manifest and moving things around. I think this is all about weirdness to deal with the way that weight is distributed on this vessel, and the way auto struts are interacting with that weight, especially as it begins to move around. Okay, so we've filled up the core vessel here. Now I want whatever is remaining to fill up, and it may not fill up all the way, but I want it to put the rest of it into all of the containers, because there are many containers here. They did not originally have, they were not originally full because I didn't think that they would be needed for the candle crane necessarily, but at this point I just want as much ore as possible in this thing, because as we have determined, we are going to need a fairly tremendous amount of delta V to get there quickly with this vessel. So we want to make sure this thing is as topped off as possible. So we want to have, before we actually get a refueling vessel moving, one that will actually move ore down from the surface of Duna up, or maybe Ike even. Actually, that makes a lot more sense. But anyway, something that moves ore back into this vessel over in the Duna sphere of influence. We are going to need to, before we can do that, we're going to need to make sure that we have enough fuel to do everything we need to do. So there is that. And we have fueled up everything as best we possibly can. We have just a tiny bit extra, which is nice. So let's go ahead and save the game. And we are going to decouple. Back it away. Extend the solar panels. Let's just make absolutely certain. Take a look. Ore is not quite full for some reason. I'm missing exactly 900 from something. So that's exactly one vessel. Hold on a second. Yeah, it looks like I forgot there was one little ore tank that was up at the top of the list that I missed. I'm sure you guys were yelling at me before. But yeah, it was at the top of the list and I missed it. So I'm just going to find it. We're going to fill that last tank up. See, there it is. Now I just got to find it in ship manifest. Okay, I found you. There. Bam! Now we're all the way full, leaving us with 470 units of ore. That's much better. I like that a lot. Cool. So, now that this thing is empty, and gosh, this thing really moves fast and handles well now that it's not full of 25,000 units of ore, we are going to send this down, and it's going to just burn up. I don't actually have an engine on here. It occurs to me that I don't even have an engine to send it back, so we're just going to be using monopropellant, what little I have left, in the hopes that we're going to be able to deorbit. Come on. A little bit more. Alright, so that worked perfect, and this thing will crash and then be destroyed. Alright, so this is our Duna tug with all 8 of the modules that we are sending down to Duna to actually build. So this is basically the long-term plan for the base, and it's wildly uneven, and we've seen it shake itself apart, so we are going to have to be very careful with the way that we actually set this up. I'm thinking I'm just going to play around a little bit with the auto struts to make sure that this thing hopefully maybe sets the way that I need it to, because this whole thing needs to be rigid so that I can actually use everything. So let me play around with that. Alright, so we seem to be moving as one coherent whole. Let's see how SAS works. Alright, that seems to be working relatively okay. Is there a wiggle? Or is this just wobbling because it weighs 1,635 tons? Probably that. But yeah, so I basically auto-strutted 4 pieces in each of these columns. So the stack guidance, the 2 material kit containers, and then the stack guidance again, then the torch drive, and then a couple things up here at the top, and they're all auto-strutted to the heaviest part, so their struts probably flying all the way through the vessel, and I'm imagining that the heaviest individual part is going to be either, I think, the torch drive or one of these do-it-yourself containers perhaps, or maybe one of the ore containers. I'm not 100% sure. So but it seems to be working-ish. So yeah, if I turn this towards prograde, it seems to not throw itself apart, which is all that really matters, I guess. So now it's a matter of figuring out when we are going to send this to Duna. Alright, so this says that we have 51,000 meters per second of delta V, but I'm not convinced that it doesn't think that we are going to be decoupling things. Turn that on. Yeah, that actually is less if I turn that on. Yeah, it thinks we're going to stage that. So I'm not convinced that that is the actual total because this has decouplers, and I think Engineer is assuming that I'm going to decouple all of this stuff before we actually go. So let me see. Yeah, just to test, I decoupled this, and it still is 51,000. So I think that this just assumes that I'm going to decouple, and then it's going to leave, which is not helpful in any way. So I have no idea how much delta V this thing has. However, I think that it's less important how much delta V this thing has, because it probably still has upwards of, I don't know, 17, 20,000, something like that. But knowing that there is a fairly optimal transfer if we just tweak this distance down to about a 50-day transfer time, that gets us a pretty decent amount of delta V, about 8,000, 8,500 or so, and I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption that this thing is going to have at least 8,500 meters per second of delta V, so we are going to plan with that in mind. Alright, so it looks like this is going to be what our trajectory is. In 118 days, which is really close to what Kerbal Alarm Clock calls the transfer window between Kerbin and Doudna, we are going to be sending off, and we're going to be kicking off at about 3,000 meters per second almost, and we are going to be arriving at Doudna a mere, let's see, we're 118 days away from the actual burn, and then we'll be arriving there in 208 days, so it's going to be about an 80-day transfer, which is not so bad. That's pretty quick. So that's what the plan is, and when we arrive, we are going to be coming in over the top this time. I have not forgotten this time that we have all of our stuff on the polar region. That means that a couple times a day we will be passing overhead of the base as Doudna rotates below us. So we will have a much easier time of getting things down to the surface, thank goodness. And when we get there, node 2, let's see, just circularize, what does that look like? 5,000 meter per second burn. So that's about what I thought, at about 8,000 meters per second total. So we are going to go with that and see how it goes. But that's actually all the time I have for this episode, so please share and subscribe, and I will see you next time.